All right, we're back, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Biblical Hitmen, folks. My name is Steven, host of the show. Today's guest is Courtenay Turner, one of the best researchers and most fun conversations that I can have with other people that like to get into the topics that I like to get into. Be sure to check out all her stuff here, and we'll get to that in just a moment, but folks. But if you want to support what it is I do here, the work that I put out for you folks, just head on over to patreon.com/the biblical hitman. You can get all of your ad-free early access, direct chats, group chats. It's just a bunch of goodie bags over there, and it's for $5 a month. It's not too bad. And if you want to support the channel over on YouTube, come on over and hit that subscribe button, like the show, share it with your friends, and drop a comment down below about what it is that you think about the episode. That's the best place that I can also interact with the audience. And don't forget, come on over to the audio platforms, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Spreaker, wherever you can consume any of your audio content. That's where the show is. I just encourage people, if you had a good time, you liked the show, you want to be nice, just drop a 5-star review, hit that follow button, hit that notification bell, and you will be aware of whenever I'm doing shows. But welcome, Courtenay, back to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it's always fun to have you on. And I messaged you on X. I've been seeing you've been putting out a lot of work. You've been putting out a lot of Substack articles and stuff like that. For the audience that may not be familiar with you, would you mind just kind of letting us know where the folks can support you?
Yes, they can go to my overarching kind of go, for everything place is Courtenay.show. And it's basically my link tree. So it's Courtenay, COURTENAY.show. But my Substack is Courtenay, and you can find that there too. But my Substack is CourtenayTurner.substack.com. And so that's where you can go and get my articles. I have all of my podcasts early access for my paid subscribers, and they're ad-free for paid subscribers. And there's my Courtenay.show. You can also get my book at my at the Courtenay.show, The Final Betrayal, How Technocracy Destroyed America, that I co-authored with Patrick Wood. So yes, the Substack has been very busy. I've been putting out a lot of articles, and I'm actually going to be, as of tomorrow, we're going to start putting the articles that have been out for a while I have one coming out tomorrow, a new one. So that will be free. I put most of them out for free, but I'm going to start putting the old ones behind paywall. So it's a good time to go and grab them for free.
I got you. Absolutely. I totally get it. I'm excited to get into today's show. And folks, be sure to go ahead and check out all her stuff. She's got great work. So the title is, Epstein, Gino, Transhumanism, right? All of the normal good stuff. I want to ask you, because since I've been seeing that you've been covering Gino, it's something that when I first got into the Epstein files, that was kind of like one of the first go-tos that I came upon, right? Then there's a few other characters that Gino is affiliated with, and it has so much to do with consciousness and transhumanism and stuff. What got you? How did you get into these topics with the Epstein files?
So I wrote an article back in August of last year, and it was called The Epstein Transhumanist Conspiracy. And let's see if I can let me pull that up right now. But yeah, so I wrote this article, and it was really, my focus was a very, very different focus than what most people were focused on. I was focused on, hang on, let me pull it up. So I was really focused on the game B connection, which is kind of an angle that really nobody was talking about. But I found it very interesting because the Weinstein brothers have been involved with the Edge Foundation, and both of them had asked a question for the 2018. They do these annual questions. And Eric had a question about something unprecedented did happen when we finally unlock our source code. And then Brett had asked if there was a course, a non-evolutionary course that was game theoretically stable. And these were both very clearly game B type of questions. They were very oriented around. So for those who aren't familiar with Game B, Brett still has this up on his Twitter, by the way, his Twitter handle. It talks about Game B. Almost all of the Game B members have been, or thought leaders have been platformed on Joe Rogan. So while many people say it's so fringe, it's, many people have never heard of it. It's been very much hidden in plain sight. So it's not, it was on Rogan. Many of them have talked about it pretty extensively. And Brett did twice. So on Rogan, 2 different episodes, he went into great detail. But essentially, it's this idea that currently we're living in Game A, which is this rivalrous type of civilization structure. They call it the Malachian structure, right? It's competitive, it's rivalrous. And so it's doomed to reach an apocalyptic state. And so they talk about we need to have a new operating system for civilization, and that is called Game B. And Game B is non-rivalrous, omni-win, win-win. And so there's a film. It's called Initiation to Game B, which I think can give you a big indication of what it's all about. It's an initiation to Game B. And their wiki page is interesting. Their wiki page, right on the front, it has quotes from Stuart Brand, who says, we are as gods, we might as well get good at it. And we are gods, we better get good at it. That's from his 1968 Whole Earth magazine. And then in 2015, he updated it and he says, we are as gods, we better get good at it. So this is kind of the, mindset. They have Prigioni, all sorts of leaders that they look to. It's a very emanationist type of philosophy. There was a bit of a schism, and I talk about this, how there's the more biological, like Darwinian biological evolutionary kind of theoretical framework, and that was what Brett Weinstein was brought in for. Then there were what Jim Rutt, who was one of the founders of Game B, calls the more woo-woo camp, and they were the more social Darwinian. So both were of a eugenic strain, but one was more social Darwinism and one was more biological evolutionary Darwinism. The social Darwinian strain, many of them were disciples of Barbara Marx Hubbard. I talk about this very extensively in this article, The Epstein Transhumanist Conspiracy, How Game B's Conscious Evolution. So Barbara Marx Hubbard was one of the founders of the Conscious Evolution Foundation, hides a eugenics-fueled technocratic takeover. And so Jim Rutt and Brett Weinstein, Jordan Hall, and a couple of others were kind of the founding members of this movement. It was really spawned out of the seeding ground was this Economic Manhattan Project that was affiliated with the Edge Foundation. This was in 2009. Eric Weinstein had put it together. And I don't think it's any coincidence that they, titled it the Economic Manhattan Project. But this was at the Perimeter Institute, and it is where Eric introduces Jordan Hall to his brother Brett. And they didn't really get things kicked off. There were a few more meetings before they really started to click, so to speak. And that happened through the Emancipation Party that Jim Rutt was trying to start. And it was a movement very much along the lines of a Bernie Sanders type of platform. And I have actually screenshots from that on that article. And they were not able to really get it off the ground. The way Jim Rutt explains it is that the boomers were ecstatic about it, but that you can't start a political movement with the boomers. And that the Gen X, he thought he could corral them. And then he said, but the millennials found politics to be such anathema to them that, they were just appalled by the idea of it altogether. So they weren't really invested in a new political movement. And so he kind of they abandoned the idea, but this got rebranded in Brett Weinstein's Unity Party that he tried to start. And they kept the name Game B, which is kind of like a hashtag, a meme, as you put up on the screen, a mimetic kind of a phrase. And it was Thor Mueller who told them to keep it for branding. And so they kept this Game B concept, which was really circulating through social media. It's gone through several iterations at this point. Jordan Hall, when he responded to one of my very long, basically essays on Twitter, telling me, it's off in like phase 3 now. We don't even know, which is true. It has dispersed through the IDW, intellectual deep web, the liminal web, the metamodernism, the metacrisis, the integralist movements. So they've kind of dispersed, but they're all centered around a very similar, the Consilience Project, which is Daniel Schmachtenberger, in partnership with Jordan Hall. But that's kind of where they've gone off to. So there has been many kind of iterations of this movement, and they don't call it gamey anymore. But even Andrew Cohen, who wrote this white paper for Manifest Nirvana, he pretty much says that Game B was he doesn't use the term influence operation. I admit that's my heavy-handed term. But he essentially says that it's a crucible for what became the intellectual dark web. And the intellectual dark web morphed into the intellectual deep web, which was launched by David Fuller, who worked for the BBC, who did the documentary on Jordan Peterson. I can't prove that this was an intelligence operation. I do have some suspicions in that regard, but both with the intellectual dark web as well as the IDW. But BBC has been historically tied to state media intelligence. That's not controvertible. That doesn't mean that this was an operation, but there's some interesting crossover threads there. And of course, Epstein was funding the Edge Foundation. He was also funding things like the Santa Fe Institute, following his, I would argue, mentor, Robert Maxwell. Robert Maxwell had invested in the Santa Fe Institute as well. And the Santa Fe Institute was a crucible for this, what Kim calls Complexitarian movement. And in the Factory Reset article, I argue that the complexity science field is a rebrand of the New Age movement. They have now couched it in more scientific, more mathematical language, because the New Age got kind of a bad shtick. People kind of recognized it, and they needed a new cover. They needed a new veneer. And so this was to give it the legitimacy and credibility. So I've been tracking the Epstein stuff, not in the same regard that a lot of people are following the flight logs and, the PDF, or I don't know what I can say here, but, the things. And I don't want to undermine those. They're tragic, and I don't condone it, obviously. But to me, the potential extinction of humanity is actually the bigger story, because it looks to me like the whole mission was AI designer babies. And that's really what this project was all about. And the more I look into the Epstein file, that's really where it leads me to. So that's what I was following back then. This was, now we're talking, it's like close to a year ago, and long before the files came out. But the files came out, and I had written an article called The Technocratic Philosopher, and this was on Jim Rutt. Now, Jim Rutt was the chair of the Santa Fe Institute for almost a decade, and he is now currently the chair of the Center for Machine Consciousness. And this is in California. The founder of that is Joe Shabak. And so he's been very involved in consciousness studies and machine consciousness. So I had written that, and I was, delved into the complexity science, the Santa Fe Institute. And then, of course, because my whole theory is that the Santa Fe Institute is really around creating a cybernetic organism. It's about creating the new monetary system, which I have written extensively about tokenization in our book. And also I've got a 4-part series that I've talked about, and I've talked about where that's going, what tokenization is, how they're transitioning into an asset-based payment system. So it's not just payment tokens, it's an asset-based token. And I also have my proof of persona article, which is about the 666 patent, the Microsoft patent, the 606. And I do believe that that's the blueprint for how this cybernetic organism will be executed. And that is the argument that I make in that article. And I think that's really what Santa Fe Institute was all about. And now that we have the release of that video from the supposed 15-hour documentary that Bannon was going to do, we have Epstein in that 2 hours. He keeps referencing Santa Fe Institute, and he essentially said that it was about creating the new monetary system. Now, he does say that it was an epic failure, but many of these things, may be at first, but that doesn't mean the project has died. And I do think that that's what that was all about. Now, he explicitly said that he moved to Zorro Ranch to be close to Santa Fe, which was also the seed of Los Alamos, right? Again, Manhattan Project. Interesting that Weinstein calls it the Economic Manhattan Project. But the Santa Fe Institute was founded in 1984. Only 2 of those scientists were not part of Los Alamos. So this does look like this was some sort of Manhattan Project diaspora of sorts. And they have now funneled into this new project of the complexity science movement. So when the files came out, I was looking through it, and my focus has really been on the transhumanist angle, because I think that's really what this project was: transhumanism and technocracy. They're, as Patrick's book says, they're evil twins, and I do think they one funnels into the other, and I do think that's a huge part of what they were studying. So Gino, you became very interesting to me because there were 548 emails back and forth over the span of 4 years. That's something like 2 or 3 every, like every 2 or 3 days. They're emailing back and forth. That's a lot. What was going on there? And you has this whole model of consciousness, the various stages of consciousness, and he was interested in what he calls interesting or special abilities. And he also was working with Joe Shabak. So we've got Joe Shabak comes in. So in that article on the technocratic philosopher, what had led me to that was that Jim Rutt wrote a series about metaphysics. And he essentially hollows out what metaphysics is and replaces it as a scaffolding for complexity science, and so that it can serve this machine consciousness studies. And so now I see Gino, Epstein, Joe Shabak, all kind of circulating. So my interest was very much piqued, and that's what led me to write this Factory Reset article, which is really a book. It's I had that one. Somebody told me they tried to print it out. It's 140 pages, and that's like full, pages, not book pages.
Yeah.
And then I did a sequel to it, and I have actually already started a 5-part series sequel beyond that. But the sequel to it is called The Dialectical Engine, and this was an analysis of a podcast put together by Brett Weinstein, Jordan Hall, and Jonathan Paggio. And in it, I analyzed, just as a case study in real time, of how the dialectical engine operates and what could have been done differently to act as a metaphysical firewall that was not instantiated. And that proves how this dialectical engine operates. So
what did they talk to, real quick? What did they get into? What did that podcast get into?
The Dark Horse podcast. So it was a public facing of a 3-day conversation that was held at a church in Asheville, North Carolina. And the conversation was centered around religion, so 3 people of differing views. And so it was it started out as a kind of the, like, what is religion? Very much a grand kind of metaphysical question. And it shifted. That my whole thesis is that, at minute 28:17, the argument completely shifted. The entire container now became inside the game theory container. So he says, that the religion is a means of solving game theoretical problems. And so now we've taken it from a metaphysical lens, and we have shifted it into an epistemological tool. And both Jordan and Jonathan Paggio, who, if they really held their faith in true regard, could have presented a bulwark, but neither of them did.
Mm. You know, I find it interesting too that Gino Yu, right? He's got this 5-stage model. He's going back and forth with Epstein, um, talking about his patients. You know, what stages are they in? Oh, they've broken through to this stage, and they're actually kind of starting to develop certain abilities, right?
Hmm.
Metaphysical, you know, supernatural abilities, I'd call it. And what's interesting too, I'll kind of circle back around to when he was at Santa Fe. When he was, you know, in like that Los Alamos area, right?
Hmm.
He funded those people. He was funding them because they were put out of a job, and it's like he jumped on
Funding
that.
who?
What was that?
You said he was funding who because they were put out of a job?
Oh, when he was in New Mexico, right, at his ranch, he moved out into that area there because some of those scientists pretty much were the funding was cut from them. And
Mhm.
so he kind of slid in there, at least from the Bannon interview. This is what I got, that
Mhm.
he slid in there and he was, you know, kind of funding these scientists to do like what it is that you were talking about earlier. Um, which is interesting because then getting into more of the files, Gino Yu is connected to Ben Gortzel.
Well, yeah,
Go,
he partners with him on OpenCog. Yeah, I go
yeah,
through that pretty extensively in the article.
it's wild. Could you just kind of explain to us Ben Gortzel and his
Ben
associate?
Goertzel. So I've been tracking Ben Goertzel for quite a while as well, because Ben Goertzel ran the AI for Good, for the World Economic Forum and for the UN. This is the AI ethics for good, quote unquote. I don't know that we have the same definition of what AI for good is, but that those are the ethics that he is prescribing for the UN and the World Economic Forum. He's behind Hanson Robotics, the Sophia robot.
Mhm.
So OpenCog is a AGI platform company, and the method of this funding is catalytic funding. So when you actually look at the dollar amount, I don't know exactly how much he funded Gino Yu. We never do see that in the emails. However, Gino calls Epstein his benefactor, so that implies there was some substantial funding. Although when we look at what was funded for OpenCog, it does not look. Yeah, he's an interesting character. It does not look like it was a tremendous amount for AI development, but this is what's called catalytic funding. So it becomes seed funding for matching funds for grants, and they ended up getting over $1 million, which is much more considerable funds, but for this project. But what's very interesting about OpenCog is there's kind of a divide in the AGI community. So people like Ray Kurzweil and Marvin Minsky are of the mindset that, so for those who aren't familiar, AGI is this notion that artificial intelligence will supersede human intelligence. And the people like Ray Kurzweil and Marvin Minsky, they believe that all that is needed is compute. So essentially, it's a computer, it aggregates its math, and that it will have better capacity than human capacity. And that's AGI. Now, Ben Goertzel and Gino Yu don't have that belief. They hold a different belief, which is that they're partners on this OpenCog project. Their belief is that in order to have AGI, you have to have consciousness. And so that is why they're so focused on this consciousness, investigation study, and and that's why they were working with Joe Shabak, because they're trying to figure out how we can achieve machine consciousness, which would be true AGI in their opinion. So.
Yeah, and so at Epstein's Island, right? They've taken some footage of his library, and the blackboard that he had up there had a lot of interesting concepts, terms. It was kind of like chicken scratch writing. A lot of people were speculating on what was what, but what I found most interesting is when Epstein had the term dark brain on there, which he talked about the dark brain matter of the brain
Mm.
in the Bannon interview, and he also, apart with that, he had right below it, axiom of Maria, and then below that was time delay. And so that kind of ties into Jung's work. It ties into other occultists who are trying to ascend consciously or evolve their consciousness, if that's what you want to call it. One thing interesting that Bannon talked about with Epstein was that dark matter of the brain. And it's kind of funny just hearing Bannon kind of truck his way through the interview. I almost wish he talked less, but
Yeah.
right.
That's canon for you.
Yeah, I know. Epstein, he basically compared the dark matter of the brain to be where the soul resides. And so I started kind of looking into what. So I've done research into the 666 patent. Everyone at this point pretty much knows about it. It's been out there for about 7 years, right? So my thing with that is I think what they were trying to do with the sensors that are kind of not talked about in the patent, but it does say sensors. So I
Yes.
started looking up in biomed and I started looking up what kind of sensors can actually map out certain things, what sensors can connect to certain receptor sites in the body. Because I'm a paramedic, so this
Mhm.
really like connected with me. I was like, here we go, like this is my jam. And so I came across something called quantum dot sensors, which Bill Gates
MIT,
has.
which
MIT.
Jeffrey Epstein funded. Yep.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
so I typed in quantum dots in the Epstein files search bar, and there's a bunch of things that are in there pertaining to that term. What's interesting is that
Oh,
those
the quant
things are
dot.
kind of, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Quant dot is what they call it.
Quant
They
dot.
don't always spell
Yeah.
it out. They say quant. Yeah.
So I'm wondering if that's something that they're using almost like a contrast dye, right? Like that I'm just saying in how they're using it, because you can then see things a lot better, right? When you get contrast dye, they can see if you've got a brain bleed or you've got a block, or they can see the pathways of the body, right? Way better than X-ray, way better than MRI, all this stuff.
Right.
I'm wondering if they were using the quantum dots to map out the brain to specifically see the mechanisms, the movements, and how to calculate how the dark matter of the brain works. Because if that's what Epstein was really obsessed about, of being the soul, it can only make me think he's trying to map it out, to measure it, to calculate it, to then move it into something else. Does that kind of make
Yeah,
sense?
I talked quite a bit about this actually on the we did Technocracy Roundtable on consciousness and machine consciousness, and a lot of what they are doing with this institute that Joe Shabak runs in California is they're studying brain organelles. And so they're trying to map they're exactly what you're saying. They're trying to track them, analyze them, assess them, and then figure out if they can possibly replicate them replicate them into a machine. I don't think they will ever succeed in their goals, but this is very much what they were investigating and studying. And that patent, I mean, it says it in the name. I actually did a 3-hour show on that patent last year. It might have been 2 years ago. I don't remember anymore. But it was, most people just read the abstract. It's actually a very extensive patent. There and the links are endless. There's a lot of links in that patent. So I went through it, and but the title alone tells you that it's about cryptocurrency tied to body activity data. So yeah, it's when someone like RFK Jr. says how MAHA is really MABA, Make America Biotech Accelerate, and that every American needs to have a wearable, needs to be equipped with a wearable by the end of 4 years. What is he talking about? It sounds like this is where they're headed. They're trying to collect as much biometric data as possible. I don't know that means that it'll immediately transfer to this cybernetic organism they're trying to create, but they're certainly setting a lot of the rails in motion right now. They're laying the whole regulatory infrastructure for the cryptocurrency, for tokenization. We hear nothing but salivation from people like Howard Lutnick and Larry Fink talking about how they're going to tokenize everything. We now have the DTCC. They just created an app for tokenization. We now have the stock exchange creating 2 rails, one for tokens, the digital infrastructure, one for the traditional stock exchange. I just put out my 4th tokenization article on that. And then, yes, we've got all this technology, which, during that time in 2020 and 2021, we had those W bands, right? The medical body wireless areas where they were testing a lot of that kind of sensor technology. So I think put it all together, I think that's really where they're trying to go.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. This is an article here written by
John Clasic.
yeah, Kleisek, yes. And I saw this on a stream that what's her name? It's Magical Mystery Church,
Mhm.
which I think people should check out that channel. It's pretty good. And I'd like to get her on, but she talks about right here biofeedback wearables,
Mhm.
right?
Yes. She was involved in a company called HeartMath. And so HeartMath is they do this on the face of it, it looks pretty benign. They talk about like meditation apps and breath work, that kind of thing. But their project is to create resonance, heart resonance, and also brain resonance. And they say they want to create global heart brain resonance. And so we do actually have an electromagnetic field in our heart, right? It's up to some people, it's up to 12 feet. When they say how some people are more magnetic than others, that's actually true. That is scientifically proven. Some people do have a stronger resonance and a stronger electromagnetic field. But they're talking about creating a global coherence using this biofeedback technology. And with her views on the noosphere, yeah, that makes me a little bit concerned. That is, I wrote pretty extensively about that in my Epstein article.
Yeah, I did some research and I found some patents out there that, quantum dots, uh, basically corporations that create these quantum dots. And it almost seems like it can also be used in the infrastructure, a part of like goods and services, where it'll almost replace like the barcode, like on
Mhm.
this,
Yes,
like it could almost replace that. And if
I
you think
think
about that, it'll connect to a ledger, it'll connect to the blockchain, it'll connect to
the mark of the beast. Yeah, yeah,
cryptocurrency.
essentially. Yeah. I mean, a lot of us were saying that back in 2020, and we were called crazy conspiracy theorists, but it's looking a little more factual than
Yeah.
not now. So,
So I wanted to ask you this. So, and plus Larry Fink, right? He was talking about tokenization back in like 2020, 2021, when everyone was on their computers because everyone was kept inside their houses, right? So a lot of this information blew up at that time. Plus the World Economic Forum kind of, was lifted up under the rock.
mhm.
Uh, could you just explain to people what tokenization, that concept means?
Yes. So a token, if a lot of people think about tokens, they think of like a game, right? You get a certain amount of tokens and then you can play around and, maybe get another life. You put in more tokens. So a token is a representation of something, though. It is not the physical thing, right? It's a representative. So you don't have the tangible thing. It's just the thing that represents that thing. So right now there are tokens. There are monetary tokens, right? People use various kinds of cryptocurrencies. There's meme coins, but a lot of what we have right now are payment tokens. And this is why I keep saying it's like a cybernetic organism where they put you into a gamified society. A lot of people like to talk about social credit scores, and I think that makes it really tangible for people. So if that's a helpful analogy, then think of it that way. But I really think of it as a gamified cybernetic organism, because essentially it's going to be a conditionally based income where you have these tokens that are an allotment. And if this code is already written, so it's like you're playing a game, and in that game, the permissions are already written into that code. So if they read your biometric data and they decide that you're not fit to use that token, you will have access denied. If they decide that the thing you want to buy is going to put you over your greenhouse gas emissions for the week, you will have access denied. You said something on social media they don't like, your access may be denied. So the tokens that they're looking at right now, though, are not just payment tokens. What they're now looking to do is asset-based tokens. So the important thing for people to understand here is that, yes, we live in a fiat currency. I hear this all the time. People are like, oh, but the dollar it's a fiat currency. It's not backed by gold. The dollar, we still have cash. Cash is not traceable. It is not trackable. It is not programmable. It is not censorable. So the dollar still gives you a lot of autonomy, a lot of freedom. Yes, I understand it's a fiat currency. I'm not advocating that. I recognize the whole creature from Jekyll Island. There's a lot of issues with it, but it is still a million times better than what they are trying to do with programmable, traceable, censorable kinds of monetary system. A second thing about our current system is you do actually have equity. So a great example of this is when a lot of people who own homes, right? They want to then buy, they want a loan for a business, for instance. And a lot of this country is predicated on small business. So a lot of people do take a loan, and they do loan against the equity in their home. So I'll make the caveat just because people say it. Yes, you do essentially lease your property from the government. If you own your home, you pay property taxes. I know there are exceptions. Some people have land patents and don't pay property taxes, and then you really own it free and clear. But for the most part, you still have equity. So you have equity because if you want to get a loan, you can take a mortgage against your home. What happens if you have an asset-based token is you will no longer have that equity. And we see this has already happened in Gaza, where people have exchanged for, I think, the equivalent of something like $5,000 for an amount of tokens. And now they no longer own the equity of their home. They get to live in this, they're putting up these high rises, and it's all smart city, right? Like everything is run through a digital kind of an infrastructure. It's a smart infrastructure. And so, it's sold as being a very high tech and convenient, modern, but you own nothing. And where this is headed, when Klaus Schwab said in the Fourth Industrial Revolution, you will own nothing and be happy. I don't know about the be happy part unless we come to love or servitude in Huxley's Brave New World. But now Trump just put out an executive order for psychedelics. So I guess they'll give us all our soma, and then maybe we'll be, drugged out and very happy, blissful or something.
Right, right.
But that's essentially where this is going. So when he said you'll own nothing, he meant it. You will rent everything. Everything becomes user access. And that's really what tokenization is about. They sell it to you as it's being fractionalized, and so you have more access. It's more democratic, quote unquote. But yeah.
Now, with this whole transhumanist movement, do you think that it has any ties to Theosophy and the sixth root race?
I think it does. I mean, I don't think everybody who is a transhumanist is necessarily aligned or drawing directly from Theosophy. But there's a lot of shared belief systems for sure. So in the factory reset, the argument that I make, the main argument is that the being lineage is the metaphysical firewall for God-given and inalienable rights, right? So we know this in our Declaration of Independence. Anybody who is biblically oriented at least should know this. This is the metaphysics of the Bible. It's this idea that we have a creator-creation distinction, and that we are imago Dei. We are made in the image of God, and that is what endows us with inalienable rights, right? So the Declaration of Independence codifies this in writing. It says, and I talk about this in the article too. I recognize that the founding fathers were not a monolith. They had many different belief systems. They were steeped in that whole, kind of a Masonic, some Theosophical. It wasn't necessarily called Theosophical at that time, but that emanationist kind of Neoplatonic, occult, esoteric. There was a whole variety of different types of belief system. That doesn't change what the Declaration of Independence says. What the Declaration of Independence says is that we are all created equal. We were endowed by our Creator with unalienable rights, the rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That is a metaphysical statement. And that is an incontrovertible metaphysical statement. It implies that there is a creator. We are not the creators. We are not one with the creator. There is a distinction between the creator and the creation, and we are part of the creation. That is explicit in that statement. And we are endowed with unalienable rights by virtue of being human, by virtue of being imago Dei, made in the image of God. we are endowed with inalienable rights because we are wired for virtue. That is a part of our existence. We have a fixed nature and we have a telos. So the term pursuit of happiness was a very intentional phrase. The Declaration of Virginia talks about property rights. There were other things that were thrown around, and property rights was in the first kind of drafting. And this was more of a Lockean strain of the founding fathers. But that is contractarian, it's voluntaristic. It's implying that the natural law is subordinate to the contract, which means you can completely override our inalienable rights because you enter in a contract, and then if you exit that contract, or the contract is written to strip you of your inalienable rights, which is what is happening now with these smart contracts and these click wrap agreements, then you don't have inalienable rights. So they didn't say that. They said pursuit of happiness, which is really a derivative of this Greek concept called eudaimonia, which Aristotle said was a human flourishing towards virtue. And he encompassed in that was this concept of articaria, which meant self-sufficiency for the home. So property is already encompassed in that. That was part of how you achieve eudaimonia. But eudaimonia is the notion that we have a fixed nature, we have a telos that is wired for human flourishing towards virtue and right action. So that is a being metaphysics, this idea that we have a fixed nature and that things have a telos, they have a purpose. And in the factory reset, what I argue is that this is the age-old, going back to 2.5 millennia, to Parmenides and Heraclitus. So Parmenides was a philosopher who believed that there were fixed natures, that things that had what it was is what it was. There's a fixed reality. Heraclitus was famous for saying you can never step into the same river twice. Everything is flux. And therefore, you are flux. You are always changing. You are never the same. This is the foundation for the becoming lineage. And the becoming lineage does not believe that we have fixed natures. And therefore, we can become managed processes. And therefore, we could become managed nodes in a technocratic infrastructure and transhumanism, where we become upgraded to the next version of whatever humanity 2.0, as they call it.
Yeah, I was listening to Elon Musk. He was talking about pretty much the future. Obviously, he kind of he gives out more information than a lot of these other technocrats, I'd say. And he's kind of more honest about it, I would say. One thing that he was talking about is that we would have the ability to choose if we wanted to work or not in the future. So that made me think of automatons, and the idea of automation is already here, but now we're talking about to the robot perspective of it, which we've seen his Optimus robots and all this kind of stuff. And it makes me think of, you've got people like Ben Gortzel who are obsessed with phenomenal consciousness and trying to bring some level of humanity to robots, meaning emotion and, just the kind of, how humans are, right? They want to make them more human-like. Right. Yeah. It's wild, crazy stuff. I don't think it could ever happen, but I think they can get pretty close. I think mankind's
mimic. They're trying to mimic. I don't think they'll achieve it, but they are doing everything possible to try and mimic, human emotion, human expression. I have this whole theory that the Botox Nation is priming for the robots, because everybody's faces is so frozen, and it actually destroys empathy, because part of how you achieve empathy is through the mirror neurons, and it is the neuromuscular coordination that triggers mirror neurons. So when you freeze those and you actually cut off the nerve center to the brain, so it diminishes your ability to feel empathy, to analyze a social situation, but also for other people, obviously, to perceive. But yeah, because they're trying to put a lot of robots. There's companies like Realbotics that are working on humanoid type robots for hospitality industry, for therapy industries. So they're actively very much working on that type of robots, which is different from Elon's type of Optimus. I actually wrote a 4-part series. There will be a 5th in this on Elon's UHI, Universal High Income, and the last part of the part 4 was the Technocratic Creed, which is on the manifesto that Palantir put out. That Alex Karp is kind of helming. But I talked a lot about Elon's universal high income, his lineage, to his grandfather, Technocracy Inc., Josh Halderman, who was actually kicked out in Canada. And then he joined the Social Credit Party and rose to pretty high ranks there. I also wanted to circle back because you were asking, and I went on this long tangent. I was trying to get to the point. Sorry, I was so long-winded about the Theosophists. But the Theosophists, Madame Blavatsky started the Theosophical Society in 1875, and this was, not solely, along with people like Quan Judge and Henry Steele Alcott, but she herself says that Theosophy is derived and inspired by the Neoplatonists. So people like Plotinus and Porphyry and Iamblichus. So it is essentially a rebrand of Neoplatonism. And Neoplatonism is an emanationist philosophy. So it's very much in this becoming lineage, right? They believe that the ancient wisdom is the evolution. Alice Bailey then has her whole cyclical kind of stage theory of humanity. The cosmos is evolving towards the next stage, and of course, that evolution is steering towards the noosphere. It's the same concept as Vernadsky and Chardin, who were disciples of Edward Leroy, which would be the conduit to create, what H.G. Wells calls the world brain. Oliver Reiser calls it the world sensorium. It's really all the same kind of concept, but it's this idea that we're all going to be connected because they already believe that we are all, the whole purpose of the Theosophists believe the whole purpose of human existence is to return to source. So that we are all, source is the God, and our goal is to return to the source. Yeah, so this is the concept of the noosphere. That we're all interconnected, this interconnected thought. So it's basically one brain, like a hive mind. And this is what people like Elon Musk do talk about. And a lot of these transhumanists, and they talk about how the machines will help us to achieve this. They've been talking about this for a very long time. This is not a new concept. It's not even new technology, but of course Elon does have the patent on telekinesis and telepathy. So yeah, but this is the crux of the argument is in that article is about the becoming lineage, and it is a straight through line from Heraclitus to Plato. A lot of people put Plato in the being lineage. I do not. I think his philosophy is inherently emanationist, and then he sets the stage for the Neoplatonists. Neoplatonism gets rebranded as Theosophy. Theosophy gets rebranded in the 60s, 70s as and then 80s as the New Age movement. New Age gets rebranded as New Thought, which is essentially the same thing, just with a stronger focus on mentalism, which is the first principle of Hermeticism. And now it's being rebranded, I think, as Complexity is kind of yeah.
Do you think there's any Atlantean mysteries tied in all of this?
Any Atlantean mysteries in all of this?
Yeah, because
what do you mean by that?
so that's one thing that I researched too is like Blavatsky talked about Atlantis, Rudolf Steiner talks about Atlantis, Plato talks about Atlantis, Edgar Cayce talks about Atlantis. Right. And a lot of New Age foundations and organizations have been created off of every one of those individuals. And it's like you said, right? They want to connect to divine source. That's even on the Great Awakening map that was brought out in 2018, which actually shows like a pretty interesting playbook of how to get there. I don't really know who created that. There's a name out there, but I don't know if it's true. But it's crazy how every single little thing on there is getting talked about today. I'm curious of this because there's a lot of talk about this idea of how they're using the technology in the exact way that you're describing and you're explaining to us, and you're absolutely right. Like that is coming. My thing is this: is that when the Atlantis mysteries. You have civilization as a whole, but there's two groups. There's an evil group that uses the technology for bad and for more material independent dominionism. And then there's a good side of it that comes together more in the law of one material, which is like more of the new age side of it, some of the new age side of it, where they're like more about spirituality, more about using the technology to ascend consciously with the divine source, and all of this kind of stuff. So I was wondering if you had put any thoughts into how there may be even a division between these forces that are all behind all this stuff. Do you think it's kind of almost got a vibe of like Star Wars, that there's a good side of the force and then a bad side of the force, but yet they're all bad because they're playing with the force? Like, does that make sense?
Yeah, I don't see it as good, bad. I mean, the quote unquote good that you've described is the love and light, right? That's let the
Yes.
plan of the love and light work out. That's the Theosophists, which are Luciferians.
Right.
And that's not my projection. I mean, that's literally what they say. They talk about Lucifer being the real God, and they're very explicit about that. Madame Blavatsky's magazine was called Lucifer Magazine. Alice Bailey, before she renamed it Lucis Trust, it was called Lucifer Publishing. So this is not, me kind of interpreting. This is very explicit in their writing and in their branding. So I don't see them as like the good. I see it more as it's a couched as love and light, but it's what is that light? Is it a false light? What are they actually? What are they actually striving towards? And yeah, I don't see it as like good versus bad. Now, interestingly enough, the AI, they have this whole conversation with the accelerationists, the left and the right accelerationists. They call them the doomers and the builders. It's kind of silly when you break it down, but essentially both narratives are necessary. They are a dialectic. So you've got the people who are saying that we need, AI is going to go rogue. And there's a whole documentary on this, actually. It's called How I Became an Apocalyptarian. Apocalyptimist is what it is. Apocalyptimist, an AI apocalyptimist. And it's called the AI doc, and it's worth seeing. And they actually got some of the big names, like Sam Altman was in it, and it's interesting. But they have the people who say that AI is going to become sentient, go rogue, and essentially it's going to be like the movie Terminator and kill all of us. And so we need to protect ourselves from that. And that's why we need to have them in control of it, so that they can, parent the AGI so that it becomes benevolent AGI. People like Ben Gertzel are involved in this actively. I wrote extensively about it in my article. In 2024, they created something called the Participatory Framework for Global AGI Constitution. And Ben Gertzel is one of the authors of this. Mariana Bozeman, a Club of Rome member, is involved in it. Laura George, who is a head of Oracle, and then the Oracle Institute, and then who is the other one, Annalose Smithman, who is Earthwise, and she's also very much a Game B kind of adjacent proponent. And so you've got these people talking about how we have to create a global AGI constitution where we can parent the AGI so that it can become benevolent AGI, and then we might have to become subordinate to the AGI, because the AGI will be better stewards of the planet than us, corrupt humans. So that's where they're going. And then you've got the other side who claim, well, we can't put any restraints on AGI because then we're cutting off civilization and we're cutting off progress. You hear this from the likes of people like Peter Thiel, right? We just have to let it keep going, and anything that puts any reins on it, that's the Antichrist. Interestingly enough, Peter Thiel's whole dichotomy between Armageddon and the Antichrist, Barbara Marx Hubbard. She wrote about.
Can you get into that? Can you get into Thiel's perspective of the Antichrist?
Yeah, so he essentially says that the Antichrist is anything that puts reins on AI. That's the Antichrist. And then he said the alternative, the Armageddon, is like a globalized, it's like the Greta Thunberg is the mascot for that. It's a global tyranny. So it's either the Antichrist, which putting the reins on the AGI, and that's the Antichrist, or Armageddon, which is, the Greta Thunberg kind of globalist tyranny. I mean, it's not really more complicated than that. That's really what he says. And so it seems like he's trying to, it sounds kind of like he's might be the Antichrist under those.
That's what the Antichrist would say, right?
Yeah, he's creating the beast system, but he's very much a proponent of, just like what they call right accelerationism. It's just effective accelerationism. You just unconditional, just unbridled, no kind of constraints, and just let the technology push capitalism to its nth degree. Just keep accelerating as fast as possible. It's like what's his name? Zuckerberg said, "Move fast and break things." And if you're not breaking things, you're not moving fast enough.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty scary too, right? When like Barbara Marx Hubbard talks about them kind of, being the function of the pale horse in Revelation for those that
We are the riders of the pale horse who need to call the population. Yes. And there was one speech where she talked about like eating babies. I don't know if it was a slip. I mean, I'm going to give her the benefit of the doubt, but it was weird.
yeah. I get that. So I mean, with her talking about the pale horse, pretty much anybody that's in the way of their plan, right? The
Mhm.
plan.
Well,
Talk
yeah,
about that.
we must be the adjudicators, for God of who should be, who should live and who should not. Like he says, 1/4 of the planet needs to be culled, and essentially, it's anybody who has the selfish gene, right? So, this is very similar to Alice Bailey and Madame Blavatsky, right? This is the reason why they were so opposed to traditional Christianity and traditional Judaism, especially Judaism, because they said it was the separateness, the fact that they didn't want to absolve and absorb themselves into, be reincarnated into the greater whole. The fact that they were separate, that they saw a distinction, was what made them so such an anathema, and that's why they had such a problem with them. So this is the same kind of concept, right? That Barbara Marx Hubbard is saying the selfish are essentially the ones who value individualism. That's her definition of selfish. So it's not people who are, when we think of like colloquially labeling people narcissists, so they're self-absorbed and they're selfish and they don't think about other people. That's not what she's really talking about. People who value individual versus the collective whole. Because she's really a panentheist, but yeah, pantheist. So
Yeah, and it almost sounds like, according like what I asked you about earlier about the good and the bad, and according to the Atlantean mystery under Edgar Casey's work, he describes the bad group as the Belial group. The good group is called the Law of One, and it almost falls, like I said, under like Barbara Marx Hubbard would technically, her philosophies would agree with the Law of One rather than the Belial group, which is about like independence and dominionism. Someone maybe like a Bill Gates or an Elon Musk, or kind of like this.
it's like left hand path
Thiel.
versus right hand path magic.
Exactly.
That.
Exactly.
Yeah, but the Law of One is this idea that they worship like the Ra. There's actually a book, right? The Ra, the sun god, and they're talking about everything is one. It's a pantheistic philosophy. So there's no separation. There is no individual. The others are, whether you're talking about the left hand path magic or you're talking about the Belial group, like it's a very similar concept. It's the extreme individual who does not care about, it's all kind of basically sociopathy, right? It's kind of that maniacal psychopathic kind of behavior. But neither of those are indicative of normal human, conduct. Most people are not raging psychopaths, and most people may have some self-respecting individual kind of values where they do want to take care of themselves because God cares about the individual, and then by an extension of that is the family, the children, the communities, and that includes the local communities, the religious communities, and so forth and so on, and ripple effect from there. But they're pointing out like the extremes. So yeah, I don't think either of those I don't see either of those as good. To me, those are both, to me personally, actually, those are both blasphemous to God.
Yeah, they're both bad. It's just which pill do you want to swallow?
Mhm.
You know, I want the blue pill or red pill, pretty much.
Yeah.
What I find interesting too is because of the law of one has been a part of my studies and everything like this. What really has kind of brought it back into culture is Adriha Puharich, right? He was a guy who was into ESP and he was also into the law of one, but he was known for being an investigator but of these channelings between what's known as the Council of Nine. And the
Mhm.
Council of Nine are these kind of like these light beings that oversee humanity, very similar to the Gnostic aeons,
Mhm.
and where all of them together are the one source. And
Mhm.
it's interesting too that biblically the law of one, right? They worship Ra, the sun god. Well, Apollo in the Bible, Apollyon, the destroyer, right? I mean, we
Mhm.
know that that has everything to do with the Antichrist. He's also the Greek sun god, which is
Mhm.
another interesting connection there.
Yeah.
I find it. What are your thoughts with the UFO, UAP, this, and it may not be something that you've put, much of your efforts into, but I just wanted to kind of ask you about it.
I just don't because I think it's such a psyop, and it's like I don't even think it's worth the time. But we've got the Disclosure movie coming out, Spielberg's movie coming out this summer. They're ramping it up. They did aliens.gov. The U.S. Government purchased that domain, so alien.gov and I think also aliens.gov. So I think the whole Project Bluebeam is going to be really ramped up. Um, but yeah, I don't put a whole lot of
Yeah,
stock in.
well, there's people that are a part of the new age, like Stephen Greer, and
Oh, sure.
who's the other one? Oh, she claims to be the associate of Werner von Braun. I forget her name, but she's another new age affiliate talking about this fake alien invasion. I'll stop there because I do think that there are way more important things to worry about. I do cover that stuff on my show because I just
Right,
like
right.
it. Um, and I think it deals with the realm that we can't see. But also, there's things that are going on like the Genesis mission, and also the Athena agenda. I don't know if you've touched on any of these or that they've come across your desk.
Oh, yeah. The Genesis mission, I mean, that's all about AI. All right. This
Mhm.
is yeah. Um, but actually I find it really interesting just because the name that they've chosen, Genesis mission, it's like they're really bold with these kind of things. But yeah, this is all about artificial intelligence, right? Yeah, I was gonna pull it up. It's all to integrate supercomputers, national laboratories, and there's actually I think it was section 4, if I remember correctly, which does talk about um essentially it's like biodigital convergence type of technologies. And is it?
Or biotech right there. Oh, there's a
Yeah,
nice
yeah,
ad.
yeah. Hey, is it section 4?
Let me find here. I think I'm still on
5,
section
okay, I was
3.
close. But sometimes, yeah, I get the flash in
Yeah.
my memory, yeah. But yeah, that really struck me, the biotechnology, essentially, like and when you read it further down, it's basically outlining, biodigital convergence technologies. So, we're talking about Genesis, which is right, that's, the essentially, the birth of the human race and where it all started. And now they're talking about the Genesis missions. Or are they rewriting? Yeah, advanced manufacturing, biotechnology, critical materials, nuclear fission, fusion energy, which I think is because they're focused on that for next gen nuclear for the data centers. I think that's going to be a big push. And then the quantum. Information science and semiconductors, of course. Yeah. So
Well, it's kind of like what you said earlier, right? Artificial intelligence it's trying to get into AGI, and I think this year it's in a style of like almost a AI Manhattan project to where it will push it to get there.
yeah. Oh yeah.
It's not good.
No, it's not good at
Really not
all.
good, dude.
I think that's what they're trying. I don't think they'll achieve their goals, quite honestly, because
So what do you mean? What do you mean?
they can't define what human intelligence is. But somehow they think that they're going to create some sort of machine that's going to supersede what they can't even define. I mean, there's so much more that goes into human intelligence than just computation. I mean, there are some really talented mathematicians that are not that bright, like in many ways, that's not to, undermine their talents. They're obviously that's a talent. But, human intelligence isn't just aggregating information either. Right. There's something very, I do think consciousness, I think they are right about that. But it's, what makes humans are soul endowed. They're not going to replicate that, in my opinion. Now, I'm not sentient, and I'm not omniscient, in that regard, present. And so, maybe I could be wrong, but I don't see it. I just don't see it.
Well, what about this? What if they're trying to create a vessel that's so close to a human being synthetically, right? Like it's a synthetic human
Mhm.
that now it has the components for, maybe spirits or demons or evil to possess it. Because if you, how I look at it is I look in the Bible and I see that, you know, when they're casting out demons, they immediately want to go into another piece of biology. If it's either a piece
Right.
of, if it's either a pig, another human, whatever,
Right.
they can only get into it because it's compatible. So I'm wondering if maybe this is what they want to do. And I say this because I've read into Gordy Rose, right, and his work and what he talks about with quantum computing and getting it to that level where he says that these entities will be like Lovecraftian and they're trying to bring them in this world. I don't know. This is these weird people in these
And then that's
sci-fi
what Nick
realms.
Land talks about too, right? His imagery is very Lovecraftian. I I certainly don't know. That's much more plausible. I mean, that seems a lot like what Alice Bailey is describing as well, with the externalization of the hierarchy, where the spirits or demons come and reveal themselves to us on Earth, and that's more plausible to me than humans, being able to merge and create machine consciousness.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
I can see that. Now, what are your real quick, what's the externalization of the hierarchy and what are your thoughts with it?
So I actually read an article on this. It was about the Centennial Conclave, and this was last year, because Alice Bailey had predicted that the externalization of the hierarchy would be in 2025, and that would be their big Centennial Conclave, and it's every quarter of a century. So starting in 1425, they believe that there's this Centennial Conclave where the spirits congregate, and that the externalization of the hierarchy would officially be in 2045. And this is where she believes that all of these spirits, some might call them demons, will come and reveal themselves. So they will start to reveal themselves to us here on Earth. And I had written a pretty extensive article on this because I found it fascinating that all these globalist meetings were happening at the same time. So they usually time it, the Centennial Conclave, with the World Invocation Day, which is, of course, where they summon Lord Maitreya, the Christ, not Jesus Christ, the Christ.
Mhm.
And so they usually time it with that and the red moon, and which is very spiritual for them. And that during that time there was like Davos meeting, the Bilderberg meetings, the UN meetings. There were all these globalist meetings, and I don't think that was a coincidence. I think they're very much kind of aligned with this spiritual kind of movement. I mean, Lucis Trust is a consultancy status to the UN. They're very much kind of like the spiritual guide for the UN.
That's why I think they did the rededication of America under God in May, because it lines up with the Great Invocation Day to in Lucis Trust. These meetings go on, or not meetings, but these prayer, meditation, whatever, the unity of the world, right, coming together. Uh,
So, oh,
Go ahead.
so no, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I didn't realize
No,
you.
no, yeah, no, you're good. It just seems like it lined up in some sort of way, because at least when I see a lot of the symbolism that they were showing, it was a lot of hermetic symbolism, a lot of symbolism that connects to what Alice Bailey talks about, right? With not only Lord Maitreya, but Sanat Kumara and who Sanat
Mhm.
Kumara is to her,
Yep.
and all of these things. Venus being thrown into the mix of this, the full moon being thrown into the mix of this stuff. Again, I'm just
Just like a
pulling all these
blood moon,
pieces to try
so
and
it
make
wasn't just
sense.
full, it was like a red moon, yeah.
Wow, yeah,
Yeah.
it's weird. It's weird.
Um, well, yeah, no, I would definitely agree with that. Sorry. So the article I have coming out tomorrow is a sequel to my Happy Birthday America article. And it was Happy Birthday America, now hand over your sovereignty. I've been tracking the AIWS for several years now, like maybe 4 or 5 years. And this is the Artificial Intelligence World Society. This is what the Centennial Vision for the UN. So 2045, they've created essentially a blueprint for a global governance body that will be controlled by AI and supplant all human government. And the book that this was predicated on is in conjunction with Boston Global Forum. And the book was written by Michael Dukakis, who's a former governor of Massachusetts, and it is called Remaking the World Towards the Age of Global Enlightenment. So I have written several articles, done several shows on that because I thought that was one terrifying and very important for people to know about. But I kept saying that was like a nod to the new age. Now they wrote a book, a new one. It's called America at 250, a beacon for the AI age. And so I had written an article when that came out, and talking about what I thought their plans were, or what that signified, whatever. The book hadn't actually been out, but there were excerpts, like samples of it. So I had read that and reported on that. And essentially my what I ascertained from it is that they're targeting the United States under the marketing of democracy, which of course we are a constitutional republic, we are not a democracy, but they're targeting us with democracy under the guise that AI will give us direct participatory democracy. Of course, that is the antithesis of what our founding fathers wanted and why they set up a constitutional republic. But this is a marketing ploy, and they have teamed up with so many NGOs and organizations here in the United States, really to accelerate this type of marketing for the birthday, 250th birthday of the United States of America. Now, I have an article coming out tomorrow because the book launch has actually occurred. And I bring this up because you talk about May, right? Well, May 1st is when they did their official book launch for this. It's called America at 250, a beacon for the AI age. Now, it's interesting. I don't have any evidence to indicate that this is why they did it, but it is interesting and worth noting that May 1st is also the 250th anniversary of the Illuminati. The Bavarian Illuminati, right? So they launched this book. They did this whole kind of press, and they did, talked about it's now going operational. But what they also did that I thought was fascinating, and I talk about this in the article that will be out tomorrow, is that they rebranded it. It's no longer just the AI World Society. So the Artificial Intelligence World Society, it is also the Artificial Intelligence Wisdom Society. Now, what did Alice Bailey talk about? The ancient wisdom. This is a direct nod to the ancient wisdom and ancient mysteries that Alice Bailey is talking about.
Yeah, and it has everything to do with the goddess mythology as well. Lucifer, how thou have fallen, son
Mhm,
of the morning. So, son
mhm,
of the morning is Venus. Sanat
mhm,
Kumara is tied right into Venus.
mhm,
Venus is being, one of the Greek goddesses,
mhm.
connecting to Rhea, Rhea connecting to Kybele or Cybele, Cybele connecting to the Magna Mater, Isis, Ishtar, Inanna, Ashtoreth. It goes all the way back to even what was the very first monotheistic religion that they can date back to the Paleolithic age, known as Venus of Willendorf. So
Right.
these things are very interesting, and it makes me think that there's going to be some sort of knowledge that's going to come into the play of all this. It's going to push humanity, I think, to rise away from the current system that we're in.
Mm.
Would you maybe agree with that, or do you have any thoughts on that?
To take us away from the current system in what regard?
Almost like an exile, like almost like something that would awaken humanity to exile from the current system that it's in, right? If we technically outnumber them 1,000,000,000 to 1,
Mm-hmm.
it kind of seems like all humanity needs is that divine spark to be,
And the divine spark to
defibrillated and then
fire. That's a Kabbalistic term. Um, yeah, no, I don't necessarily see it that way. I do think that if they put us into some sort of a technocratic kind of infrastructure, where there is, say, like a mark of the beast, a tokenized, cybernetic, gamified society. I do think there will be people who will opt out. I mean, some people will be more equipped to than others. But I think people are very resilient, and I do think people will, uh, convene with the those that they can, and opt out as much as they possibly can. I do think you'll see that.
Gotcha. Because I was going through one of Alice Bailey's books, The Externalization of the Hierarchy. There's a quote that just like, I mean, I don't know. I want to get your interpretation of this. I want to get your perspective of this when I read this. Because I'm wondering if this, I mean, according to her, this is all a part of the externalization of the hierarchy. And she says, the time will come when the false hierarchy, which has controlled the human race through lies and deceit, will be exposed. As these false powers are revealed, humanity will turn to the true spiritual teachers, those who have always stood for unity, love, and truth. The exposure of these false forces will lead to the establishment of a world religion built on the foundation of universal truth and rooted in the understanding of humanity's divine purpose. So, what are your thoughts when Alice Bailey, who's influenced a lot of the people that we've probably talked about on this show so far, what do you think this looks like in society today or in the future?
So this she's talking about perennialism, right? And so my factory reset article, I talk about the changing images of man document. This is it was officially published, I think 1982 into a book, but 1974 they did the first draft of the publication, and they explicitly say that the future religion will be perennialism. So this is why, again, I go back to the being versus becoming, because they say that the traditional perspective of man's image of himself, the Western civilization tradition of man, which is the Imago Dei tradition, right? This idea that we are made in the image of God, and that we have inherent dignity, therefore we have inalienable rights. We have a fixed nature, right? These are kind of the traditional views of Western civilization. They say that's exhausted. That must be, done away with, and that the future coming religion will be a perennial religion. So perennial world religion. This is what Madame Blavatsky says that Theosophy is. She says it is a perennial philosophy that encompasses all the world's religions except traditional Christianity and traditional Judaism. Although interestingly enough, she very much defends Orthodox Christianity, because she was Russian, and she's very defensive of Eastern Orthodox Christianity. But all other Christianity she does not support, and traditional Judaism. She welcomed Kabbalistic and mystical variants of Judaism, but not traditional biblical Torah Judaism. And so this is the perennial religion. What the quote that you just read me with Alice Bailey is essentially saying it's an inversion, right? So when she says the deceit and the false hierarchy, she's talking about the system of she's not talking about what she aspires for us to achieve, right? She's saying we're all going to become one. This is we're all going to be, I guess, under Lucifer's reign, right? Lucifer is the god of this world, for both of them, right? Biblically speaking, he is as well. But I think that's so when she says the truth, it's the truth, it's a Luciferian truth. It's right, the Luciferian light. That's the esoteric knowledge. And the truth is esoteric wisdom, which is what the arcane schools were. Right. So Lucius Trust has the World Goodwill servers. The World Goodwill, which is they do their We Suck festival every few years, and it's the world servers. So those are essentially the people hoping to build the noosphere, where everything is integrated, everything's interconnected. That is theoretically the sixth stage of the root races. that before we get to the seventh, where everything is one. It is all a noosphere. It's all interconnected, and we return to source. So that's part of the world goodwill. And then there's the triangle school, and there's arcane. And arcane, if you read the books of arcane, of course, Lucis Trust is, most people know, but arcane is explicitly for esoteric teaching. And she says that it's for the initiated. So when they talk about the truth, I think that's what they're talking about. They're talking about esoteric knowledge.
Gotcha. So, I mean, since we're talking about Alice Bailey, I've been looking into the 7 rays that she talks about in all of this. What are your thoughts with her teachings on that?
In terms of what?
Because sometimes when I read this stuff, I'm trying to always put it in perspective of like, what's that going to look like today? I guess what would that look like today for you, or how could we kind of incorporate that into reality?
The whole self-help movement.
Yeah.
The whole field of psychology, the integralist movement, Ken Wilber and his levels of altitude, Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which was really all about the being values. And actually, he wrote something called Politics 3, which is very interesting to me because in 1971, Willis Harman published it. Now, that was right around the time when he was working on Changing Images of Man. And it was Bertha Maslow who brought it to Willis Harman and Robert Cantor, and they published it posthumously. Maslow had passed at that point. But Politics 3 is a pretty short document. You can find it on the State Department Education website and Eric Files. And he talks about holistic politics, which looks like what very much inspired people like Robert Mueller, who was the he was the Assistant Secretary General of the UN for 4 decades. And he wrote the World Core Curriculum as part of his 2000 ideas that became 4,000 or maybe 7,000. He fancied himself quite the visionary and didn't stop. But he said it was predicated on Alice Bailey's Education in the New Age. So that's explicitly what the World Core Curriculum, which Charlotte Isabit claims is where we got the Communist Core, Common Core. She called it Communist Core, here in the United States. That was adopted from the World Core Curriculum. But the whole premise behind that was to put every, child to breed global citizens. And now in the modern age, it's really about putting every child on a blockchain ledger as part of a global technocratic infrastructure from, birth to grave. But yeah, so I think that, Alice Bailey, we see kind of her influence all over the place. Maslow also inspired Barbara Marx Hubbard, and the language is very similar, right? When you hear the language of these conscious evolution, it's very similar to what Alice Bailey talked about with her 7 rays and with the Blavatsky's root races, these cycles, this cosmic evolution. All right, that's a conscious evolution. It's almost the same thing. The cosmo-erotic humanists who are disciples of Barbara Marx Hubbard. This is the David Temple. David J. Temple is a trio that they didn't want any ego, so they created a pseudonym, which I find kind of ironic because there's nothing. There's nothing egoistic or hubristic about creating anthro-ontology, which completely replaces the anthropology of the human. But it's Mark Gaffney and Zach Stein. Zach Stein was inducted into the Club of Rome in 2024, and Kenneth Wilber. So the 3 of them make up David Temple, and their framework is called First Values, First Principles of Evolving Perennialism, 42 Propositions on Cosmo-Erotic Humanism. And so we see the language of co-creation, conscious evolution. This is very much a reminiscent of Alice Bailey and Theosophy. And Maslow was also very much an inspiration to Barbara Marx Hubbard. Barbara Marx Hubbard talks about the Eupsychian network and how Maslow taught her about Eupsychian networking. She said it was better than sex, and she called it super sex.
Wow.
Yeah.
Golly, man, these people, it's hilarious. There's something about 7, I know, of the occult, it means completion and all these kind of things. And I mean, even, biblically it's completion and all this stuff. But I think that there's a bunch of interesting connections with Theosophy being a 7, Alice Bailey's 7 rays, the New Apostolic Reformations, the 7 Mountain Mandate. It's kind of like, what's going on here? Are we just seeing an evolution of
Well,
of
wasn't
just
7 also God's number? So
yes,
they wanna take everything that's good and invert it and pervert it. That's what it
right.
looks like to me.
No, absolutely. I agree with you 100%. 100%. Um, I wanted to ask you. So I know you had and forgive me. I forget her name. Jay Dyer's wife,
Jamie Hanshaw, yeah.
Jamie. Okay, yes. You had her on the show. She did a pretty awesome presentation with you. Getting into Eastern mysticism
Yes,
and Tibetan, Buddhism and
Buddhism,
all of this stuff. Because according to the seven rays, right? I think Bailey was also talking about, or at least hinting that this is the seven rays of light, right? Where it's basically the rainbow, the light spectrum. It's
right.
interesting that Constance Cumby wrote a book, The Secret Dangers of the Rainbow, and it's a
Hidden
big
danger.
symbol for them, right? So, what are
Well,
your thoughts with
the whole trans movement, right? They took the rainbow. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. It's like, come on.
Well, I
What I
think
mean,
again, that's it. They're taking the rainbow was God's symbol, right? After Noah's Ark.
mhm,
So it was a very sacred symbol from the Bible that they're taking it and inverting it. Once again, that's kind of
right, right. And then there's the in Tibetan Buddhism, I think they call it the Tibetan rainbow, or it's basically almost where you enlighten yourself so much that you leave your body, uh,
right.
but it's like a rainbow
Like
body that
astral
you get
plane, yeah.
afterwards. That it's
Astral
it,
projection kind of thing.
yeah.
Yeah.
Now, do you think that Eastern mysticism is saturated in the Western side of the world? It's just very hard to discern.
I think there's a lot of it. I actually had a follower reach out, was so upset by that episode. We did a couple of episodes together, and we will be doing a follow up on the second half of the book. It was a very long book, and that part is more, the second half is more on the geopolitical kind of aspects of Tibetan Buddhism and the Dalai Lama. So I'm looking forward to that. But yeah, I had someone reach out to me who was so upset and telling me that modern Buddhism is not dark like that at all. And I understand a lot of people. There are a lot of people who buy into Theosophy and New Age, and they're not necessarily overtly maniacal, dark people. They think they're doing good. They think it's love and light. They're deceived, in my opinion, and I think that's the intention. It is to deceive, but there are a lot of people who do buy into this because it seems like it's one love. It's just you know spiritual. It's become very trendy, and I think there is an allure, a mystique, if you will, to it. I lived out in Santa Monica, California for quite a long time. I was involved in the whole circus community. I was an aerial acrobatic performer, and I was actually an acro teacher. So I was very much involved in that world, and there were people who were not just into Buddhism and more of the kind of spiritual side of it, but there were people who actually did tantra, very much involved in that. The whole Burning Man community, they're really into that stuff. So I think it is very pervasive. I think it's like any kind of esoteric movement. There's rings on rings, right? So there's the initiated, and then there's the outer rings, and I think they don't necessarily know. I know Masons who it's just a fraternity to them. They have
Mhm.
no idea what these books are about, and they don't know what their fellow 33rd degree or whatnot do. I even know some in that higher ranks, and they don't know. It's rings on rings, right? So there's people who have been initiated to certain stages and certain levels, and I think it's the same thing with that. We watched, so it's funny. I watched it. Jamie had sent it to me, and she hadn't watched it yet, but my husband and I watched Twisted Yoga, and it's a very interesting documentary series following several women who got caught up in this tantric movement, and essentially a cult. It was an international cult where they were trafficking, and it was pretty dark. But you see these people, these women talking about it. I mean, they were just searching. I
Mhm.
don't think they were thinking they were going to get into some weird kind of sex magic cult. They just thought they were going to learn some yoga and some spirituality, and so I think there's a lot of it. We've in this country, there's been so much kind of a you know a secularization of education, of culture, and that is not necessarily atheistic. I think that's a stepping stone, but it's become kind of inverted and very spiritual. And that's what that's what the New Age movement was all about. That's what the hippie movement was all about. Certainly we see the whole New Thought movement. Oprah popularized all of these New Thought characters for a decade, interviewed almost every single one of them, and all, Deepak Chopra. So yeah,
He's in the Epstein files too.
What?
Deepak Chopra, he's in the Epstein files too.
He is in the Epstein files. That's right.
Yeah.
Interestingly enough, he was on Qualia Life's website. They took him down, and I have screenshots of all of that. But Qualia Life was Dennis Schmachtenberger and Jordan Hall. It was originally Neurohacker Collective, but they took out anybody who was tied to Epstein, anybody who was like most of the Game B people. They took out the Tescrial crowd. Yeah, it was very interesting. They scrubbed it.
What is Qualia Life?
So it used to be called Neurohacker Collective. I talk about it quite a bit in my Epstein transhumanist conspiracy article. And I dug for the seed funding that Jordan Hall had put in. I had to go and read the fine print on the SEC filing, but I did find it. And it was a bridge loan. And so it's a supplement company. It was originally called Neurohacker Collective. And now they sell creatine but I do think it has kind of life extension adjacency, biohacking kind of, it's popular in that community. But at their website used to have a board that was 60 people, and
okay.
was on it, not on
Gotcha.
It's very big. Anybody who follows the alternative health community, that you'd know Quality of Life. Yeah,
gotcha.
Josh Axe was on it. A lot of the I think Huberman was on the board. It was, yeah.
Now let's wrap this back into Peter Thiel, right? Let's wrap this back into Alex Karp and Palmer Luckey, right?
Okay.
So we've got these Lord of the Rings nerds, right? Naming all their organizations after interesting movies that the crystal ball predicting the future and all of this. With the 15-minute cities, what would you say? What do you think the world's going to look like in 10 years?
Oh, well, the plan for 2030, I mean, they're pretty much ramping things up. It seems like speed. I mean, 2030 is not far away at all. But yeah, what do I think? I don't know. They're trying to do it they've got many different angles. So these smart cities, I wrote an article on this too, actually, the path to mass surveillance. And I outlined the different types of, there's, the 15-minute cities, the C40 cities, which is the UN, green agenda city. There's Trump's freedom cities. There's Jordan Hall's Civium project. So you have all these different names, but essentially they're all smart cities. And there are many different infrastructures for this. They've got the network states, which are really growing in, kind of popularity and backing. Peter Thiel's got his Prospera down in Roatan, Honduras, which is a network state. The subsidiary used to be called Vitalia, and the website said a city where death is optional. It's now called Infinita. And there's a great documentary on it where they talk about all these, essentially transhuman experiments that they're doing. It's the billionaire, paradise with the illegal billionaire paradise with they make their own laws, something like that. And so that's it. But then he's got the Praxis project in Greenland, and they called that Trump is calling it a freedom city. And Balaji Srinivasan himself said that that's the quintessential network state. And then they've got a sister project called Atlantis in California. And Thiel is also involved in the Highland Rim project, which is affiliated with the CREC. And that's a network state. So that's kind of like a Christian nationalist network state. So there's a lot of these, Yarvin has his own network state. There's a lot of these various different projects which people are opting into. So under things like DAOs, decentralized autonomous organization, this is more of they're really trying to capture, I think, the libertarian minded kind of communities, but essentially they're all going to be integrated. This Balaji Srinivasan in his book The Network State explicitly says in section 4.7, he says it's decentralized towards a re-centralized center. So again, this is H.G. Wells. The decentralized ganglia are going to be the conduit to create the world brain. And he explicitly says it. He also says that it's predicated on Patrick Friedman's concept of the seasteading, which is interestingly enough quite reminiscent of Ghislaine Maxwell's Terramar project. But Peter Thiel invested $1.7 million into the seasteading project and didn't really get off the ground. But in Balaji Srinivasan's book, he says it's predicated on this concept of seasteading. And he thinks that seasteading will be no problem to get it back on the ground. As soon as we get the network states up and running, we can crowd fund for, cruise ships on international waters.
Yeah, I was talking. I had a round table the other night with a few buddies of mine, and this is the website here, Praxis Nation.
Yep.
There's it's like some just weird imagery on this website. This kind of reminds me of the Shambhala, maybe, right? The mystical city. And you obviously have, I've seen this imagery, right? Michelangelo paintings, things like this, which points a lot to a counterfeit trinity of a godhead. Mm-hmm. And also, I've seen this as well on World Economic Forum insight reports about the power of data intermediaries. I don't know if you've seen that one, but talks about basically putting technology in the body. It's just also wild, crazy. What do you think is going to be the cheese for humanity?
The cheese?
Yeah. What do you think the cheese is? I mean, high income, high universal income. I mean, that's the only thing I can think of.
You mean like the trap, like the mouse trap? The cheese?
Yeah. What's going to get the rat to get into the trap?
I really think that right now we're really trying with the tokens. I think that they're going to squeeze people into opting into tokens. I think that's I don't know.
Like, if we're not going to own anything and be happy, does that mean we rent everything?
Yes, it's all user access.
So if I want a chainsaw,
it's not just rent; it's subscription model. So it's what we do already. So like you have let's say you use X. You can have your various models. You can get your blue check mark, then you can get your higher blue check mark. You have to pay for that. If you don't pay for it, then you lose your privileges. You own a Tesla. Your GPS is a subscription model. I think I've heard even the air conditioning is a subscription model. It's crazy.
Oh wow, is it really? Yeah. I mean, I'm never getting an EV unless I seriously have to, but
I mean, I don't own any of these, but I've heard it's like the whole thing is subscription model. So like I could see, I don't know if this is how it works now, but I could see like just even to start your car could be a subscription. You don't own it. You pay subscriptions and you get an upgrade and get an iOS upgrade. You keep paying for that. Or it just automatically upgrades, but you have to pay in order to keep using it. But you have that right now with all of these various AI subscriptions, right? If you use any kind of AI model, you have different levels. You have to pay your subscription. So it's essentially going to be user access. But where this goes is then the user access is written into the code. So what happens when your access becomes your biometric data? What happens when your access becomes tokens, which are already, permissible money based on a smart contract? So it's encoded in permissions based on, could be your biometric data, it could be your behavior, it could be, your behavior history, it could be your genomic sequence. That indicates maybe that you're prone to ADD, and so we're not going to let you use certain things. I'm making up obviously silly examples, but yeah, this is where they're going. I mean, I don't know if you've seen the episode, if you watched Black Mirror, there's an episode called Rivermind. This is where she has an accident and she loses brain function. She's essentially dead. But they offer the husband that they could revive her with this technology. Essentially, she gets a chip in her head. And so when they start out, it's great. She has a couple of limitations, like, she has to sleep a little bit more to power the grid. But then she starts speaking commercials. And in order to stop the commercials, she has to do an upgrade. And then they go on a drive and she's out of zone. Well, they've got to do an upgrade. So it's a subscription model and user access.
Wow. Wow. Now, I almost think too, right, I think the outcome of all this war going on is going to have something to do with changing the energy infrastructure globally, right? I mean, we've got the things going on with, obviously, the gas prices are skyrocketing up. Oil is, it could be gate kept at any time, apparently, and it just makes me think that it's going to, through that Hegelian dialectic, humanity is going to want to push more towards everything electrical, because then now we can power it here within our own nation. Have you put any thoughts into anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, electrical is still really powered by fossil fuel. That's kind of a myth that was part of the whole climate narrative. They're not really separate. I do think there's going to be a major push for next gen nuclear. So nuclear energy. I think that there's a lot of research already and funding being invested towards that. So I do see that happening. I do think there is going to be a major, global infrastructure shift. We're already seeing that with the IMEC corridor, right? That's essentially the choke point for the oil transactions. We're already seeing now China is going to be buying oil from us, which is really crazy if you think about it. This whole Pax Silica looks like it was a bargaining chip, leveraging to squeeze China out to force them to come to the table as part of the possibly global technocratic infrastructure. We're seeing Trump, he started this World Liberty Financial where he created his own truth dollar. That's very clever to marketing. But the World Liberty Financial was essentially invested by, the Gulf Sovereign Wealth Funds, $500 million into his own personal, truth dollar coin. Then we've got the Board of Peace, which looks like it's going to be a supersession to the UN. And he's made himself essentially, I joke, the world monarch, because he said that he is a board member for life. He runs the Board of Peace, and then he can choose the successor. So kind of like a monarchy. And the Board of Peace is a purchase seat for a bargain price of $1 billion. And then we've got now what happened with this meeting with China, with Xi Jinping and Trump, is we got the Board of Trade, which looks like it's going to supersede the World Trade Organization. You've got an entire rerouting of infrastructure with what they call Pax Silica. This is very much indicative of a new global order of quote unquote peace order, right? A peace through strength kind of order. We had Pax Romana, Pax Britannia, Pax Americana. Now we've got Pax Silica, silica as in silicon. So this is compute, AI, chips, semiconductors, and the physical rails for, like the IMEC corridor. Here is Pax Silica. And then we've also got the Board of Investments, which will be funding the Pax Silica. So we've now got 3 boards, the trilogy of boards that have been erected, and it does look like we're looking at an entirely new geopolitical order that is really run by AI.
Yeah, artificial intelligence would technically be unbiased, right? Like it would be.
Well, except for who sets the code.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, exactly.
It's never unbiased.
Right. Oh man, do you think it would get to the point by 2030 that it would be in some sort of position in the government? I mean, we're already using it. Government's already using it right now. So I mean,
Yes, there's
it,
AI.gov, there is ChatGPT.gov, there is OpenAI.gov, and this is already government officials have their own passwords entry into using these portals. So yes, the government is already using it. The military is already using it. But there is the AI World Society blueprint, right? This is for the centennial of the UN, the 2045, to create a central global governing body using AI that supersedes all human government. And they do talk about they talk about Ukraine being kind of the central node in all of these other nodes. So again, when people talk about decentralized, it's decentralized towards a re-centralized center. So you've got all these various nodes. They talk about the C40 nodes that will all be interconnected, but they say Ukraine will be the central hub of all of these nodes that are interconnected. Um,
it's wild. I was listening to Sam Altman in an interview, and he was actually telling a story about how one of the users that uses ChatGPT, the platform, pretty much came up with some sort of code to then create medicine for his dog, and it healed his dog. And then therefore Sam was like, we have to put restrictions on these. He's got like this super deep raspy voice that just makes it sound like almost that much more wild. But he's saying basically that they have to put chains on artificial intelligence, because if this was to get out, if the wrong people were to get their hands on it, basically we could have bio outbreaks, right? Like, I mean, pretty much another pandemic, right? Like it's interesting that artificial intelligence does have this capacity. I don't think it's that good yet. I don't know. I mean,
Yeah,
this is
it's not there yet. It does some amazing things, but it's apparently it's like exponentially improving. Like every 4 months, it's doubling or something like that. It's really moving fast. But this is what I was talking about earlier with the doomers and the builders, right? You've got the people who think that AI is going to go rogue and, we've got to put these constraints on it, but they're the ones to put the ethical rails on the AI. So as long as they're the good guys in control, so that they write the code, it'll be benevolent AI, AGI. But then you've got the others who say, no, don't put any constraints on it because we need it to, we need to compete in the world and we need to accelerate and we need to let it achieve all that it can be. So you've got the two sides, but really it's really a dialectic. They both think that it's inevitable that,
you think that there would ever be another constitution to for the people because of just how
well,
technology's evolved?
they're trying in 2024, they wrote the participatory framework for a global AGI constitution. The global,
Really?
yeah, that's what I was talking about with Ben Gertzel,
Oh yeah, 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 yeah.
and Maria Bozeman. Yeah, Marianne
What
Bozeman.
about like CBDCs and stuff like that? I remember someone for the Treasury of the United States back when they had a meeting in Geneva, the World Economic Forum. She was pretty much advocating that because the blockchain and cryptocurrencies will be, where money and the monetary system goes, there has to be a constitution written, to govern it in some sort of way.
Right. So remember, Trump ran on the whole campaign that he would not allow CBDCs. That he was, of course, in January of 2025, he actually rescinded that executive order. So it was kind of all just lip service. But what he did do was create this, he passed this Genius Act. So essentially now, instead of having central bank digital currencies, we've got Congress-backed digital currencies, which in some ways I think are actually way worse because I'm not advocating for central bank digital currencies, but there are actually more regulations on that than there would be on Congress-backed digital currencies. But yeah, so that's what he's advocating for. Now, interestingly enough, with the Genius Act, we talk quite a bit about that in our book, but in the Genius Act, originally the Clarity Act was part of it. The bankers pushed back and there was so much resistance that they took the Clarity Act outside of the Genius Act and they passed the Genius Act. Trump has already signed that. Now they're trying to push the Clarity Act. There was a lot of resistance, but now it has passed the Senate Banking Committee. So it does look like they're going to pass the Clarity Act, which means they will really be able to tokenize assets. And they'll have a regulatory infrastructure for tokenization. Now, they don't need the Clarity Act for big institutions, these big major banking corporations. They don't need the Clarity Act, but for everyday people to use it, which is what they do need in order to, have the programmable money.
Yeah, I mean that it's all going to be a huge crash course from everything. I even think like Oracle's going to get involved because
Oracle's already evolved.
oh right.
Yeah, Larry Ellison's having a field day.
That guy is wild because he talks about people wearing body cameras and they'll be very cheap and affordable, which means it can go into mass production, right? With
he does not mince words. He pretty much lays it all out there. Oh
he
yeah,
does. But it makes me think, looking into the Athena agenda, pretty much this is going to, I think, incorporate that patent 666 just that much more, because then that kind of ties in Oracle, because Oracle's like, hey, they're basically talking about artificial intelligence having the ability to pick up disease or cancer before it even gets to any stage.
AI medicine, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and then I mean that to me is the cheese, right? Like that's what's going to be that thing for people to.
I've warned people about this before Trump even got into office, because people were so excited about Maha, and I said, I love the concept, make America healthy again. Who's going to argue with that? Let's please get rid of the pesticides, get rid of the seed oils. I'm all on board for all of that. Trust me. But I said that's not what this is about. This is about AI precision medicine, which Obama was really invested in, actually. And people laughed at me, but I would have liked to be wrong. Trust me.
It's wild. I used to work in clinical research, so I used to be the paramedic that drew blood all the time. I was in the lab. I was like this little lab nerd or whatever. I functioned the protocols of Moderna, Johnson & Johnson, Pfizer, all of them pretty much. I got pretty used to seeing how the FDA works with clinical research and how they have a relationship that's a little interesting. But I remember that, and this was like 6 years ago now, there was talk going around, obviously because of the times, but they were already putting things in production and already testing things where it was almost like they can give medicine. I gotta be careful how I word this. They can give medicine to people that's programmed to the people.
Yeah, so Abilify is actually an example of this. It was how do you say his name? Alboro, the Pfizer executive. He was talking about this, but he was saying how you can take a pill and then it would have a tracking mechanism to know when you needed your next dose, for instance. And I'm pretty sure it's Abilify actually uses this already. It's essentially nanotechnology.
Yes, that's what it is. Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, Albert Bourla. Yep.
There he is. Yeah, I remember this. This was such a fun time to be alive.
Right. He was talking about it at the World Economic Forum. Yeah.
Right.
On one of his panels.
So much fun. So much fun. Well, I was a paramedic on the front line during all those times, so it wasn't really that much fun for me.
I can't imagine. Oh my gosh.
I ran the most calls I've ever ran in my life, but it made me into the paramedic I guess I am today. So, take the good out of whatever you can. So I guess we can get ready to wind down, land this bad boy. I was going to ask the crowd that's watching if there's any questions that you have for Courtenay, shoot them in here, and we'll run a couple by her. And Courtenay, thank you so much. This has been a lot of fun.
You're welcome. Thank you.
I appreciate your work. And yeah.
Thank you.
So Ultra Seeker says that and the quantum dot tattoos, the pill is just an RFID, but your biofield has its own signature, as well as your brain and your heartbeats. And that's the interesting thing too, right? I even think smart dust is a real thing. Again, people
it is a real thing. I don't know how much is being used, but they've proven that there is smart dust.
Yeah, they're trying to they're sending all these things because they're putting all these things out into society because it's meant to retrieve data, right? And it's like, what are they trying to really do? Are they trying to really build their own body? Like, are they trying to use civilization to map out how to build, a human body to then transfer consciousness to? It's something I've given thought to.
Well,
Obviously, I
yeah,
don't think
they
so.
talked about uploading their consciousness to the cloud. Didn't Sam Altman just like pay something like $10 million to have himself uploaded and preserved?
It's
And then he'll
wild.
have to be euthanized first. But yeah,
It's wild.
I
It's
know.
wild, man. It's wild. Well, it seems like the chat's kind of not asking questions. So
They're
what's up
chatting.
with that? It's a live show, everybody. Come on.
Yeah.
But Courtney, thank you so much. If you've got any a last message you want to share with the audience, and if we get here we go. We got a question. Do
Okay.
you think here, we'll bring it up.
Mhm.
Do you think Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. will be the next president?
Interesting. I actually don't. I'm not seeing a whole lot of momentum there, but there was something called Operation Phoenix, that term again. But it was a 2026 project for the midterm. So the Robert RFK Jr. is actually very much at the helm of that. And so that's part of like the United Independence movement. There's a lot of the trans political movement that's like the moving beyond bipartisan kind of politics. Most of what they're advocating is they talk about in Operation Phoenix specifically. They say that they want to, influx Congress with independence. They don't use the term flood. That's my term, but that's essentially what they're saying. But when you look through the roster, it's really technocrats. It's like they're all arch technocrats. And you have to remember that RFK Jr.'s campaign manager was Charles Eisenstein. Charles Eisenstein wrote Sacred Economics. He is very much involved in that whole like Game B adjacent community. So I don't think he will be. It looks like they're kind of grooming maybe Vance or Rubio. And I think it'll end up being like one of them for president, the other for vice. But Vance is very much Peter Thiel's protege. He put $15 million into his Senate race. And then Rubio is very much Larry Ellison's. He's been financially bankrolled by him. So two technocrats.
Yeah. We got another question here from S90, one of the best researchers I've ever, had the opportunity to hang out with. Don't suppose she would be interested in a roundtable on the weekend? I don't know. Options out there. Well, connect with me through email if you got time this weekend or anything like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let me see if there's anything more in here.
Mhm.
Oh, okay. Here's one. How to escape all of this? That's a good question.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna talk about that. So, I mean, I don't think that it's necessarily like, I like to say best laid plans of mice and men, right? So, some people believe that it's all kind of destined and, they do talk about the beast system in the Bible. So some people think it's inevitable. I think several things. One, noble cause is always worthy of fighting, regardless of the outcome. I don't have a crystal ball. I don't predict the future. I don't know what will happen. All I can do is fight for what I think is right. So I think it's incumbent upon all of us to do that. But I also think that their plans have slowed down, derailed, some cases been completely thwarted. I go back to when I tried to sound the alarm on the NACs, the natural asset companies. And I thought for sure they were going to pass this through. So very quickly, for those who are not familiar, I think it was 2024, they were trying to put a new class of asset like up on the New York Stock Exchange. It was Intrinsic Exchange Group, which was mostly the Rockefeller backed organization. It was only created for this purpose. Partnered with the New York Stock Exchange, which was complete, conflict of interest, but to put this new class of assets up on the New York Stock Exchange. They partnered with the SEC. So there was a proposal to create this natural asset company. And I thought for sure they were going to put it through because they thought they were going to make upwards of $500 quadrillion. So I didn't really see them wanting to leave that on the table. But I knew that there was already 25 state attorney generals who had made a case for why it was illegal. And so I knew that if people submitted comments, they had made a very short comment period. They did it through Christmas. That's always when they give us these beautiful gifts like the Federal Reserve Act and, or Income Tax Act, Christmas gift. But they were trying to slide it through the holidays, and it was one of the shortest comment periods in history. And I knew that if you submitted comments, you had legal recourse. So I went to sound the alarm. I did a radio hour. I went on every show that would have me to talk about this. And I just told people they're probably going to push it through, but please submit a comment. And I even showed them like my comments. You can just cut and paste and, say, I agree with this, and just submit that. You don't even have to write your own comment. They flooded comments. I went on InfoWars, and it's a pretty big platform. And so I think it was the next day the SEC actually rescinded their proposal, which I was shocked. Now that does not mean that the fight is over. We must remain vigilant. They've rebranded. They're calling it like the Sustains Act, and they're moving forward. But they did rescind their proposal. This is just one example. We have impact. We do have power. And I think that people need to seize power wherever they can. So for a lot of people, that starts really with the individual. Remember, this was the whole thing I was saying, that it's the one versus the many, right? That God does value the individual, and he has given us free will. And I think it's incumbent upon us to exercise our free will. We all have unique gifts, strengths, and talents and passions. And I think we should let the passions be their guide. It's not going to look the same for everybody, what we do. But I think that there's no shortage of things that we can do. And then I think the other thing, it sounds small, but I really harp on. I mean, I just wrote this insanely long factory reset, all about the being versus becoming lineage. And I think the reason I keep drilling this metaphysics is that I think anybody who comes from particularly a biblical framework needs to defend this metaphysics. It is the metaphysics of the Declaration of Independence. So it is codified in our founding document, but it is the bulwark. It's the firewall against transhumanism and technocracy. I had somebody, I was on a show this morning, and they were arguing with me, well, governments have always violated our rights and our property rights, and so you can't expect them to stop. And I was like, no, I don't. I mean, people in power exercise power. That's what they do. That's human nature, and that's what power is designed to do. It's incumbent upon us. You need to know what your rights are. You need to know what it means to be human and defend your inalienable rights. That requires every single one of us exercising our civic duty and standing up, defending our rights. So I think people need to, learn those metaphysical principles of what it means to be human, defend our inalienable rights, and teach your children that. That very much needs to be taught to the children. So I think that's something people can do. And then tangible things, we saw all the mama bears rise up during 2020 when, the Zoom classes came home and they were horrified by what they saw. A lot of them joined the school boards and they started making a fuss, and a lot of them made a big difference. So, we see it with the farmers who are fighting against the Climate Smart Commodity Project. I'm giving tangible examples, but there's no shortage of things people can do, but no one person's going to do everything. So, and we're not all going to do the same thing. So you need to figure out where your passions lie, where your resources and talents lend themselves, and let that be your guide and take action.
Yeah, no doubt. I've come to the point where I just moved into my house, which it's like that was a terrible process, but I won't get into that. But I've got land, and my thing is to start learning how to grow food, start learning how to develop, my own systems, right?
Great.
That my own funding can support for the time being, and build it through just like how an ecosystem works, where everything starts sustaining each other.
Yeah, the Articaria, self-sustaining homes. Yeah, we're going to be launching our tallow line, tallow skincare. So it's called Glow with Tallow, and this way I can be my own glowy and fund myself. That's been my, and none of the big institutions and none of the intelligence agencies want to fund me. So I'm going to be my own glowy. But yeah, that's what we need to do. We need to be resourceful. And
we've got a couple questions. I hope you don't mind. I don't want to keep it too long, but we'll get ready to wrap it up. So ask her about the Council for National Policy and what is that? What is this?
Uh,
So
yes, well, I'm not a huge fan of the Council for National Policy, and actually, Charlie Kirk was on the board of the Council for National Policy. Um, yeah, I mean, I'm not a fan of any of these kinds of organizations because a lot of them may cloak themselves in being kind of conservative, but they support causes that are kind of antithetical to conservative movements. This one tends to have a lot of like Christian nationalist kind of ties. So
gotcha. How do these companies make quadrillions, but our country is bankrupt? I mean, that's Catherine for you.
Yeah.
Good old Catherine.
The companies make quadrillions. Most of these companies don't actually pay taxes, so that could be supporting the country. But yeah, they get exempt, and so the whole tax the rich doesn't seem to apply to the corporations or the NGOs or any of these multi-million or billion-dollar entities. Yeah, I mean that's not what's creating we're in massive debt. That's the spending bloated apparatus, and really, I mean the debt is what runs the economic infrastructure. It's actually debt that runs it. So
Gotcha.
yeah.
Gotcha. We got one more here. I think I
Yeah.
didn't want to skip this one. S90 came back again. He wanted to ask you something. Said earlier when you were saying, I'll just throw it up. Earlier when you were saying when the quarter century conclaves happened, were you saying Wesak was when they meet the ascending masters?
I was just saying they do their Wesak festival every few years, and that's usually when the World Goodwill servers meet. So they have like the World Goodwill servers. As far as the cycles go, actually, they think that they're going to be essentially the high
Oh,
priest.
so this is like the General Assembly of the hierarchy,
So the
kind of.
General Assembly of the Hierarchy that's a centennial conclave. Um,
Okay.
that they do every quarter of the century. So that's why 2025 was, but the WESAC festival, I think they do it every 7 years actually. But that's where the Goodwill servers meet. So it's the people who have been trained in like the arcane school, the initiates who are they're the high priests that in level 6 will become, they're breeding for the next stage, which will be the oneness essentially.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, the oneness that's what the UN actually had a conference on it, with manifesting the oneness, as they called
Mm.
it.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Courtney, thank you so much. I deeply appreciate you. Giving me a couple hours of your time tonight, and also the producer behind you. Just let him know as well. Where can the audience check out your work and find where to support you?
Yes, so I have my kind of like one-stop shop is Courtenay.show. That's my link tree. I spell my name like Courtenay, Courtenay, .show, and that is where you'll find a place to buy my book. It is on Amazon, and we have the Kindle, we have the audio. The audio is only 3.5 hours, and it was done by a real human. So there's like no excuse not to have this information. But we have the paperback copy as well. If you want to buy more than one copy, I recommend you go to technocracy.news because you'll get a discount for even 2 copies. And then, yes, this is, of course, my website is CourtenayTurner.com. And then my Substack is CourtenayTurner.substack.com, and you can find that through the Courtenay.show as well, and that's where you'll find all these articles. And I am starting a new thing where almost all of my articles are public right now. I have very few that are behind paywall, but as of tomorrow I will be putting the old ones behind paywall, and I will have, the new ones will be out for a period of time. People can read them for free, and then they will go behind paywall. So if you want to have free access, maybe try and get at it tonight. But CourtenayTurner.substack.com, and that's also where I put all of my podcasts out, early access for the paid subscribers and ad free, because I don't have control over the ads on the other platforms, but it's ad free there. And they have access to comments. But like I said, right now, I've really pretty much put everything out for free. So,
Right on. Right on. Well, this is good information, right? That is much needed out there as much as possible. Courtney, thank you so much. I appreciate you once again. And if you wouldn't mind, just hang out in the green room for me, and I'll catch you after the show. But listen, everybody, thank you for tuning in. Much love to the chat. Much love everyone. Lighten this thing up. I appreciate it. If anyone wants to support the show and support the work that I do, just head on over to patreon.com/the biblical hitman and get all of your ad-free early access and also direct chats, group chats over there. Bunch of goodie bag stuff. And if you want to come support the YouTube, just head on over the Biblical Hitman and hit that subscribe button, like the show, share it with your friends, and drop a comment down below about your thoughts of the topic, the episode, the guest, anything. Pretty much that's the one of the best ways that I can engage with y'all in the audience. But that's not the only places to support the show. Head on over to the audio platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spreaker, and Spotify. Pretty much anywhere you can consume all of your podcast content, that is where the show is. I just encourage people, if you like the show, you had a good time, be sure to leave a 5-star review, hit that notification bell, drop a follow, and you'll be notified whenever we're posting episodes. But going to keep rolling, going to keep going. God bless everybody. Have a good night.